So far we've added a website, of course, and some typography. We've added our own typeface from the internet. But of course, this isn't too experimental. What we've got at the moment is just a static website. So let's start to add some movement and add some kind of changes to this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about adding the hover state. So if I want to kind of hover this, I want to make some changes. So how do we go about doing that? So the first thing I'm going to do is, because this is all to do with how it works and looks, I'm going to stick in my style.css. So when I hover the header, I want it to make some changes. So just like before, we have our body, which is our default styles, and then we have our header, which has its own styles. The next thing we want to do is add some styles just for when we hover the header. So how do we go about that? Well, what do we want to change when we hover the header? What I want to do is just make the font size a little bit bigger if I hover that area. So there's only one thing I want to change, which is this thing, when the header is hovered. So I'm going to add some more space, and I'm going to do this between header and footer. As long as this is below header, it's fine. It could go below footer if you want it to. I like to keep things together, of course. So what we're going to do is add header again. So we're picking the header tag, but now we only want to do it when it's in a certain state. The state that we want it to be in is when it's on hover. So I'm going to add in a colon in here, and then the word hover. So when the header is in the state of hover, we want to do something. We want to change something about how it looks. So what do I want to change? Well, I want to change the font size to be even bigger. So in here, I'm just going to do font size is how big? Let's say 64px. Let's have a look at that. Let's see how it works. Now remember that this won't work on mobile because obviously it hovers for only when you have a cursor. As you can see, I'm moving around. So what we're going to do here is if I hover here, it gets bigger. Now, if I wanted to add some kind of transition state between the two, where would I add this? Well, I want to do this when I hover on this, but also when I hover away from this as well. So where would I add this? Well, if I wanted to do it just on hover, but not hover off, I can add a transition to this. But I want to do it in both directions, when I hover on and hover back to this normal header. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in my general header tag. So not header hover, just my header tag. I'm going to add in a transition. What do I want to change? Well, I want to change the font size. Font-size. How quick do I want this transition though? Well, for now, I'm just going to make it something like 2s, 2 seconds. So it's quite a slow one, just so we can see it working. So if I go back and I hover now, you see it getting bigger and smaller. If I hover, that transition is in place. Now again, if I wanted to add more changes to this, maybe I want to change the color of this, for instance, I'm going to add one more thing. I want the font size to change and the color. Now color is the text color in this instance. I'm going to pick a random one in here. I'm going to remove it a little bit later. Pink. It's not going to look the best, but let's see how it looks. So if I do this right now, what we'll get is as soon as I hover, it will turn pink and transition. But if I hover off, it switches back and uses transition just on font size. So what happens if I want to change the color with the transition too? Well, I've got my transition here. Font size is 2 seconds. I also want to add in a comma. I want the color to change over 2 seconds as well. So I've got this picking and choosing of what I can do. If I want the color to change quicker than the font size, I can add that in as well. Now again, it's quite basic. I've got something that changes color from black to pink and then back the other way. Doesn't look too cool. But for now, it kind of works. It kind of looks okay. We'll keep this as it is for now. But what we'll talk about next is we'll add some kind of transform. We'll kind of start to mess up the font a little bit more.